Greetings and welcome or welcome back, depending on where you're at in the course series. My name is Nadi, and I'm so glad that you are joining me for this module of the flower of life and the vector equilibrium. The flower of life and the vector equilibrium are so interwoven, literally, one is nested within the other. I want to give you a little bit of information so you know what you're drawing. It is so important to have the multidimensional understanding of the sacred geometry, of the best way to interact and use the shapes for consciousness expansion, right? This isn't just a little 2D shape. These are levels of profound transformation inherent in the geometries when you're drawing them. So let me jump into a PowerPoint for you. Okay, so the flower of life is this beautiful universal pattern that we see woven into much of the fabric of our reality. If you started with Module 1, we drew the seed of life, which is how you get to the flower of life. I'm going to show you several different iterations of the flower because there's lots of different ways you can stop and start and get end results. And you're going to learn them today. So just to recap some of the information that we've gone over, part of the intelligence of the flower of life is that it is universal. It is found in most every country and nation globally, and it is also found in ways that compel us to ask, where did the information come from? Where did it originate? If it's everywhere, where did the geometry come from? The underlying issue is that it suggests intelligent design, right? It suggests some sort of overall orchestration. And so that's one aspect, that universal aspect of sacred geometry that makes it so profound. The other piece is that we are the geometry, right? This to me is why we call it sacred geometry, is because when we're drawing it, we are connecting with the fundamental essence of us, right? Here's the seed of life and how the circles resemble and mirror the original bifurcation of cells and the cell division that continues on to the 64 cell division. And we're going to look at the flower of life with a 64 spherical structured pattern today. And so remember, this is two-dimensional, three-dimensional, multi-dimensional. We are drawing us, which means we are connecting more deeply to us on multiple levels: subtle, profound, esoteric, metaphysical, physical, all the realms. We're touching on all the realms when we're drawing the flower of life. So here's a reminder of the progression and how the shapes are related. So this PDF will be included in the module, so you can print this up and take a look at it. This is a wonderful overview of how we start with the seed of life and the 7 circles, and that leads us to the egg of life, the 3D version of the seed of life. And that takes us to the flower of life, which can have a bunch of different forms. Today we will be doing this iteration of the flower of life. We will be doing this iteration of the flower of life, which is enclosed in the zona pellucida. And then we'll also be doing the full expression of the flower of life. And the full expression is necessary to get over to Metatron's cube, the 13 circles, which is the fruit of life that open up to give us all of the platonic solids. So it's this complex interrelationship of open and enclosed expressions, which translates to open and enclosed expressions of information. These shapes contain intelligence, much like our cell wall. The zona pellucida is the membrane of our physical cell wall, and it keeps all of the information of the cell, the DNA, the mitochondria, all of the functioning elements in the cell. Think of the flower of life as cosmic intelligence contained within a membrane, right? And so we can draw the shapes inside the membrane, and then we can also take the membrane off to release and reveal some of the intelligence, right? So it'll be fascinating to watch the process. It'll also become clearer as we're drawing. This is just the overview. So here is a 3D representation of the flower of life, all of the spheres, the 64 spheres. And then inside here, you can see the petal structure, and that's going to inform us of the bones of the 64 spheres, right? So what I mean by that is that there's a linear structure inside each of the spheres, and it's tetrahedral in nature. Okay, so it's 64 tetrahedrons packed together to get this structure. Now, this structure is extraordinary. There is so much information packed in this shape, I barely know where to begin. But we're going to start with the star tetrahedron, right? This is a 64 star tetrahedron. So in the center is a star tetrahedron, which is, of course, our Merkaba, our light body. So this geometry is containing information about our geometric form. We can also see how the number 64 corresponds with so many universal traditions, spiritual symbols, and how the number is truly culturally significant across time. So here you can see the relationship to the zodiac as well as the I Ching. I want to show you a list of the various ways that the number 64 is significant in cultures and across time. There are 64 codons in the human DNA. Right there, where our DNA is the most fundamental building block of our reality, and it's 64, and then this geometry has 64 tetrahedrons. Like, that's got to be a huge indication of something significant. That's the best I can put it. 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, 64 runes in the Mayan tablets of the law. We've got the encoded description of the Tetragrammaton in the Hebrew Bible. We've got fundamental computer memory bits. We've got the book of Tantra in Hinduism and Chinese language, and it just goes on and on to, again, show us some kind of larger hidden pattern with the numerology, with the geometry, just to name a few. And I want to show you this video. This is the transition into the vector equilibrium. Here we're going to see how there is a shape embedded in all of the tetrahedrons. When I say vector equilibrium, that is one name for a marvelous shape you're going to see. The other name is the cube octahedron. So we're going to look at how within the star tetrahedron that is within the 64 star tetrahedron, we're going to see how the cube octahedron is packed in the middle, and then I'm going to talk about why it's such a remarkable shape. So the cube octahedron is named as such by Buckminster Fuller, and it is one way of describing the fact that this is a cube and an octahedron mashed up together, right? So it's also called the vector equilibrium, which means all of the vectors, the lines, are equal. It has an equilibrium, and it has this perfectly created point of singularity. It has a still point. It has a perfectly balanced point of energy and focus, right? So this is a remarkable shape, geometrically speaking, and I probably cannot express the significance of this shape, but it's where physics and metaphysics meet. This is the point of energy, magnetism, and attraction, right? This is where our electromagnetic field circulates in and out from. It is simultaneously an exit point and an entry point for life force. And when I say that it's where metaphysics and physics meet, I mean that this is the still point that those who meditate seek. This is the quiet inside. This is the still point of insight and awareness. It's also considered the point of singularity, or a black hole, or infinite source of energy here in that singularity, right? This is essentially, if we can harness, this is essentially what's being harnessed with free energy technology, right? Is an infinite source of self-sustaining energy. Fascinating stuff. I can barely even touch on it. It's just so remarkable. So we're going to draw the vector equilibrium in the next module. It is profoundly easy to draw, just as easy as the seed of life. So we'll get to that in a minute. But here you can see the 3 different planes and axes, and this gives you a nice dimensional feel to the shape. I also like to include artwork when I'm doing the overview. And here you can see a really lovely combo platter of the flower of life in the background and the hexagonal pattern that the vector equilibrium is in there. It's really great to play with the visual shifting of shapes, to find the different shapes in some of the graphic design. And this is going back to the flower of life and the many, many different patterns and ways that you can express the shape. And I really want to encourage everybody to just go online, go to Pinterest, find some art. These artists can be found online. And they're just examples of the geometry, of the different ways that you can play both graphic design as well as original hand-drawn art. This is Crystal Eyes. She is a fabulous artist, to say the least. This pattern, I just want to say, to rainbow blend out is actually a little bit more challenging than you'd think. And that's true with the flower of life as well. So I'm going to show you a bunch of different ways to draw it, because it's one of those patterns that if there is an imperfection early on, because you're exponentially building on the circles, the imperfections get really big by the time the shape is really big. So we only do this class, the 4th one in, because hopefully by now you've got a little bit of practice, but it's not as easy as you think. Again, Crystal Eyes and some of her beautiful work. Just giving you examples of all of the different ways that you can play with the fractalization or which shape to emphasize. And definitely go online, check out some of the patterns. It really is infinitely fascinating. So we will get right into the drawing.